I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Here's a check of your first word news. At the White House today, flanked by industry workers, President Trump officially imposed stiff tariffs on imported steel and aluminum while excluding Canada and Mexico. He also left a window open for exemptions for other countries on the basis of national security. The U.S. will levy a 25% duty on steel and a 10% one on aluminum. The top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee says a subpoena for further questioning has been requested for former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski. Lewandowski today refused to answer questions from special counsel Robert Mueller for the second time. Florida Governor Rick Scott is debating whether to sign a gun control bill delivered by the Florida legislature to his office today. Scott has 15 days to either sign, veto it, or let it become law without his signature. The measure would raise the minimum age to buy rifles from 18 to 21 and create a waiting period on sales of the weapons. And the Pentagon has approved danger pay now for U.S. troops serving in Niger, Mali, and parts of Cameroon. It comes 5 months after 4 American soldiers were killed in an ambush in Niger. The memo approves retroactive pay going back to June. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti, and this is Bloomberg.
And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, President Trump signs stiff tariffs on imported steel and aluminum, and Elon Musk weighs in. What it all means for tech next. Plus, on this International Women's Day, we hear an incredible cast of female tech leaders. Catch our conversations with Ellen Pao, Google's Diane, Greene, and execs from Uber to Amazon. And Disney shareholders vote down the media giant's executive pay plans. We'll have the latest from the company's annual meeting. First, to our lead. President Trump is following through on his pledge to impose stiff tariffs on imported steel and aluminum while excluding Canada and Mexico and leaving the door open to sparing other countries on the basis of national security. The implications of the tariffs are far-reaching around the globe, and tech may be among the first to suffer. Now, Tesla CEO Elon Musk has jumped into the fray with some tweet-by-tweet lobbying. Tweeting at Trump, "Do you think the U.S. and China should have equal and fair rules for cars? I am against import duties in general, but the current rules make things very difficult." For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde in London and Bloomberg gadfly Shira Ovide in New York. So, Shira, President Trump has yet to respond, but I've got Twitter open and I am watching. What do you make of Musk's tactic here and raising the issues around cars in particular?
Look, I think what you're seeing from Elon Musk's tweets is frustration on his part. And it has little to do with the tariffs and more to do with he's been trying to build a factory in China to build Tesla cars so that they would not be subject to the Chinese import duties on imported cars, which makes those cars prohibitively expensive in China. And he hasn't been able to reach the deal that he wants with the Chinese government, which is to own a Tesla factory outright. And so I think what you're seeing is a little bit of anger boiling to the surface there in the form of tweets.
Speaking about tech more broadly, Caroline, the EU is retaliating. What U.S. goods could be affected?
Yeah, this is fascinating and really seems to be almost slightly hilarious choice of goods coming from the United States, because really they're stereotypical US goods. What we're hearing from the EU is that in order to fight back, they're saying, look, we might put our own tariffs of about 25% on, say, bourbon whiskey. Well, watch out, Mitch McConnell, because that's coming from your home state of Kentucky. What about the likes of a Harley-Davidson motorbike? Watch out, Paul Ryan. That's, of course, made in Wisconsin, and another stereotypical U.S. brand, should you say. And lastly, of course, we're hearing from the likes of your hometown, San Francisco-made Levi Strauss, saying that they could put 25% tariffs on them as well. Notably, no real tech products in those sorts of companies being named by the EU. EU, but this is their fight back because in terms of steel and aluminium, it's important. There's about 300,000 jobs in the EU riding on that sector. We're talking small fry, though. The overall tariffs the EU is thinking of punching back to the US total less than 3 billion euros. And if you dig into the Bloomberg terminal, if you just punch in ECTR, you can really see how big the size of trade is between the US and the rest of the world. There are some big numbers. Look at nut 5, Germany, $162 billion worth is done per year, and we're talking just 3 billion euros worth of tariffs here.
Now, let's talk about tech products and tech companies more broadly that will be affected. Shira, Apple, seems to be potentially top on the list. There are a lot of unknowns here, but of course, iPhones and iPads are manufactured in China. What kind of an impact is Apple potentially bracing for, Shira?
Look, it's a little bit hard to know at this point. As Caroline said, the big issue is this going to be the beginning of a broader trade war where we're going to see other countries outside the U.S. impose all kinds of new import duties on American-made goods? And likewise, is the U.S. going to impose broader than just steel and aluminum, more import duties on foreign goods coming into the U.S.? And Apple, as you said, is in a little bit of this weird bucket where it's an American company, but it makes goods, most of its hardware products, in factories in China, owned by a Taiwanese company, Foxconn, and with components that are literally coming from all over the world, principally in Asia, but not exclusively. So it's a little bit hard to know whether Apple counts as an American company or not.
And then Apple could potentially get hurt on the other side, Caroline, given that 25% of its revenue is from Europe. Talk to us a little bit about the very complicated dynamics facing U.S. tech companies, if indeed the president does impose these tariffs impacting technology more broadly.
Yeah, if we got a broader tit-for-tat tariff battle going on, this really could hit US tech companies selling products into the EU. So as you mentioned, Apple gets about 25% of its revenue here from Europe, but we equally have Hewlett-Packard. It gets about 25%, well, about a third of its overall revenue coming from the EU. You've also got Fitbit, for example. I'm trying to think of well-known products here. Fitbit gets about a quarter of its revenue from Europe. IBM gets about a third of its revenue. So big US players could be hurt if we see tariffs placed on them by the EU. But equally, well, if Donald Trump puts on tariffs to European tech companies, remember, we're actually a bit of an exporter here ourselves to you guys. We've got the likes of Chipmaker and Infineon. They get a substantial amount, about 13% of their revenue from the United States. I'm thinking of other ones like Siemens, the German juggernaut engineering company, technology company. Siemens gets about 30% of its revenue from the United States. This could get really messy overall if you start embroiling tech products, and even if we go into services, that would be a whole host of issues. And the numbers are big, actually. 85 billion euros is how much the EU imports in terms of products, high-tech products from the US. But equally, it's about a similar amount. About 80 billion euros is imported by the US from the EU. This would get really messy if we broadened it out to tech.
All right, Caroline Hyde for us in London, Shira Ovide in New York. I am watching President Trump's Twitter page to see if he responds to Elon Musk. Now, a stock we are watching, Snap, fell more than 1% in trading on confirmation it cut more than 120 engineering jobs. The round of job cuts is Snap's biggest to date after a turbulent year that included a rethinking of its ad business, an exodus of top execs, and a widely critiqued redesign of its app. Snap says the company is seeking to improve the Snapchat app and engineer culture. Coming up, we continue our coverage of International Women's Day, how Twitter exceeded its goal to hire more women in 2017 and had to set a higher goal for the next couple of years. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Today is March 8th, which means we are celebrating International Women's Day, a day we embrace women throughout history and around the globe. I think every day should be International Women's Day, but it's officially today. While Silicon Valley takes pride in its progressive views on many cultural issues when it comes to diversity, progress in tech has been slow. We are sitting here with two women who have made a huge impact on the tech sector and have much to say about how we can improve it. Patty McCord is the author of Powerful, Building a Culture of Freedom and Responsibility, and spent 14 years at Netflix, where she was Chief Talent Officer. Minnie Ingersoll is also with us. She is COO at Code for America, co-founder of Shift, and a former executive at Google. Thank you both for being here today.
Us.
Yes, yeah. Yay us. So women, as I mentioned, are still vastly underrepresented in the tech industry. Twitter, interestingly, has set a new goal to hit women accounting for 43% of its workforce by 2019. Of course, it's still not 50%. But let's talk about how more companies get there. And I know there are a lot of things at play here, but Patty, what is the #1 thing companies need to do?
They need to own it, not have it be an HR issue. So, you know, I was talking to an engineering friend of mine, and he said, "You'd be so proud of me. We have 3 women on our executive team." And I said, "How many women are on your people on your executive team?" He said, 12. I said, "You know, you have a PhD in math. What's equal mean to you?" Like, I'm thinking it's 50%, which is not 3. Great math for me. So part of it is to actually look for achieving parity, because that's what we want, and not be satisfied with some progress. And then it's hard work. And so bringing people into the field is everybody's job. It's not the recruiter's job. The job of great management is to build amazing teams that get great work done on time. So go find amazing people.
Minnie, you've seen this from the perspective of a huge company like Google. You've seen this from an entrepreneur's perspective, trying to raise money. You know, what's wrong? Because it's not only that it's not getting better, it's just been so bad for a long time, and in some places it's actually gotten worse.
Sure, I think that if we just focus on recruiting, we're really missing the core of the issue, which is actually how do decisions get made within these big companies? How does Sand Hill Road make decisions? And actually, if what we're looking at is you come to the table for an hour to argue for your ideas, and you have to, you know, pitch with confidence, and that's how we decide how resources are allocated, that might not be actually creating the inclusive culture we want. So I think it's much more than just recruiting. It's actually building the cultures that attract people and then have people want to stay.
Do you think, Patty, that this needs to come from the CEO, that the CEO needs to make this an explicit priority? I mean, obviously everybody needs to work on it, but, you know, it certainly can't be just happening or, you know, motivated by one part of the organization.
Yeah, and I want to avoid like the extremes, right? It's the CEO or it's HR, right? Well, there's everybody in the middle. And in a case like Google, you know, that's 200,000 people. So it should come from everybody, certainly everybody in management. And so the more that people can see managers engaged in promoting women from within, making sure that the pipeline has women represented in it, being aware of these kind of issues, talking about it. I think I told you earlier about someone who called me and said, "Oh, you know, the Silicon Valley thing, they must be just worried that all their employees have gone rogue and go to the internet to complain." I said, "Go rogue? You mean like use social media?" like we all do. And the reason why people go rogue is they don't have anybody they feel like is listening to them. So to me, there's 2 really important pieces. The first one is, yes, talking about parity, 50-50. And the second one is listening to people's real stories. Because that builds trust, right? And then people feel like they're in it together. So it's not the CEO's job, and it's not the HR person's job, it's all of us.
Minnie, I'm curious about Google in particular because, you know, I just wrote a whole book about this issue, and there's a whole chapter on Google and how Larry and Sergey, the founders of Google, really cared about this and focused on hiring women, and then sort of dropped the ball, and the numbers at Google are now fairly average. And at the same time, this is a company that's facing lawsuits from both sides, from women who say they're not getting paid enough, and from white men who say they're being discriminated against. What's happening here?
Well, I think there is some of what I was talking about before. I mean, it's just a hard situation, right? Like, you can't win on both sides of that. But I do think that, you know, this is what I was talking about. Like, I go to, like, Google product strategy was where you'd go and you'd pitch your idea. And we really need to understand how to get everyone's voices included, so that you know, we're listening when someone's not speaking up, when they're not voicing their idea, and we're creating a structure there. that I think Google has done all the low-hanging fruit. I guess that's a lot of the low-hanging fruit, which is like we have nursing rooms and we've got generous leave policies. But I think we need to take it to the next level of how are we actually making decisions.
Patty, you're nodding.
I'm thinking about a story I wanted to tell you since we met last. Remember, I hadn't read Brotopia. You gave me the book, and as we walked out the door, you said to me, don't you think it's terrible that Apple has this glorious campus but doesn't have daycare in it? And my HR brain kicked into reptile gear, and I said to you, oh, Emily, that's really difficult to do because we have liability issues in their facility. That can't be done. It's really too hard. It's too hard. It's too hard, right? I don't know where this voice comes from, but apparently it's still there. The next day I go to Texas. I'm in this meeting, and Dean Carter, who's the head of HR at Patagonia, is there, and he says, today we hired as an intern someone we met at 8 weeks old in our daycare center. Right, and Patagonia for decades, right? And all this, like scales fell from my eyes, and I thought, oh, for God's sake, we can hire a bartender and put them on payroll
and allow people to bring their dogs.
And we can figure out how to help families be productive at work. And so, you know, a lot of this is really important that we talk about words about how an inclusive workforce makes us all feel better, right? It makes us all feel included. I'm not that sympathetic, partly because we've been screaming for decades and no one ever did front page headlines. And so, you know, there's plenty to worry about other than the fact that we're discriminating against white men at work. I think that case is going to be pretty hard to make.
So we have only a minute left. I know we could talk about this for hours, but this gets to the idea of retention, and I know that you hate that word, retention, but it's how do we create cultures that are, you know, but it's not just about hiring, it's about keeping women once they get there and making sure that they're progressing.
Well, one thing we have to do is celebrate, right? It's actually great to be female in Silicon Valley and have a degree in computer science. There are issues, obviously. We've heard about the harassment, we've heard about discrimination, but also being female and having a degree in computer science, I get asked to be an advisor to companies. I get to be asked to do speaking engagements. I get to be on boards. It actually does allow you to interact with engineers and have a seat at the table. So I do think we need to keep encouraging women and celebrating the success.
Oh, me too. And I think it's not about retention. It's about progression. It's about making sure that people get opportunities and that we're celebrating the people that are in front of us every day. Right? It's not about always reaching to the outside to find that next great candidate. It's looking inside, making sure that we're all getting the same opportunities, that we're all being listened to, and that we celebrate the great progress that we can make.
All right, well, I am so happy that you guys were here to celebrate with us. Today, Patty McCord, author of Powerful, longtime former Netflix executive Minnie Ingersoll, COO of Code for America, and two amazing women. Thank you both.
Thank you, Emily.
Happy Wednesday.
Yes. All right, coming up, we go behind the scenes at the world's most valuable startup. Uber's Megan Joyce talks about how she's taken steps to positively change the company's culture after a challenging 2017. This is Bloomberg. As we continue to celebrate International Women's Day and women's huge contributions to business around the world, we also spoke with Megan Joyce, Uber's regional general manager for the U.S. and Canada. We started our conversation talking about Uber's business and changing culture and her role in it. Take a listen.
I've been extraordinarily lucky and have had a remarkable experience at Uber. Since the day I came on board, I've been working for an incredible woman who was leading our East Coast organization at the time. We had an org that was 50-50 men and women that was really supportive of people of different backgrounds and frankly different styles. And it was a place where I really felt like I could thrive and I could really encourage those around me to thrive. And to be honest, a place where I knew I could come into work every day and make decisions with integrity and fight for what I knew was right. I think the disturbing thing that we've all realized over the course of the past year is not everyone in our organization can say the same thing. And so it's been invigorating in a way to say, that this is our mission going forward. And I've been deeply involved in ensuring that our culture and our norms and our business practices going forward are ones that we can all be proud of. I think the exciting thing is that we have teams in the company who have shown that we can grow and we can scale in a way that we feel proud of. And now it's up to us to ensure that every single team across the company can say the same thing. And I'm really excited about the progress that we've seen to date.
You were obviously hired by Travis Kalanick, and there's been a big changeover. Curious, how your work and your mandate has changed under Dara Khosrowshahi, and if you're seeing an actual change in the culture at Uber as a result of his leadership.
There has been a distinct change in our company, in the mandate from the top, and in the direction that we're going, even strategically. I think we have acknowledged that we need to articulate and hold our teams accountable to doing the right thing every time, even if it's something that is going to cost us a bit more, especially in the short term.
Where is the balance of power between growth versus profitability? Talk to us about where the pendulum is and what you've been told by Dara about his priorities.
Yeah, we need both growth and profitability. Any company does, and especially if it's optimizing for the long term, then we need to ensure that we are continuing to invest in long-term growth, but ensuring that we're doing so in a sustainable way. And I think the challenge of any business leader is to hold those two things in top of mind at the same time, and to ensure that we're helping navigate a company through those trade-offs so that we're consistently putting the long-term interests of the company first and ensuring that we're setting ourselves up for long-term sustainable success.
The competitive landscape has also changed, and there's some data to show that Lyft gained riders as Uber was going through this big cultural transition. What do you think you have on the competition, and are you at all concerned about the threat of Lyft?
Look, I think riders and drivers always have a choice about whether to use Uber or not. They can use another ride-sharing platform, or they can drive their own car, or choose to walk, or some other alternative. And at the end of the day, what we find really exciting is the opportunity for people to be able to leave their keys at home, or not buy that second car, or never buy the first car to begin with, and consider using options that are actually more sustainable for our cities at large. When we do that, then we'll need fewer land in our cities allocated to parking. We'll have less congestion on our streets. We'll have safer roads because we don't have people who are getting behind the wheel drunk. And we'll have great opportunities for drivers who need it. And so I think as we think about some of the lessons we've learned over the past 12 months, it's to ensure that we are consistently delivering on the promise to riders and drivers so that we have a better option than anything else out there, and that they are consistently coming back to have a high quality, safe, and consistently affordable ride on the rider side, and that this is a co-pilot that they can rely on the driver side. And I think we're making strides in that direction, and we won't stop until we're really getting it right every time.
Some of my conversation with Uber's Joyce there. Coming up, we sit down with Diane, CEO of Google Cloud, how she's fending off the threat of Amazon and doubling down on innovation. Next, this is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Here's a check of your first word news. President Trump told reporters at the White House that South Korea would be making a major announcement at 7 p.m. Eastern Time today. He also followed through on his pledge to impose a 25% tariff on steel and 10% for aluminum.
We have to protect and build our steel and aluminum industries, while at the same time showing great flexibility and cooperation toward those that are really friends of ours, both on a trade basis and a military basis.
Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar welcomed EU Council President Donald Tusk to Dublin. Tusk confirmed the Irish border issue must be resolved before moving forward in negotiations. Britain and the EU agree there must be no hard border between Northern Ireland and EU member Ireland, but it's unclear how to achieve that. The UK vows to punish the culprits responsible for what it's calling a brazen attack on a former Russian spy and his daughter. The two were found unconscious on a public bench Sunday and are both hospitalized in critical condition. Officials say enormous resources are being used to hunt down the suspects. And in Sri Lanka, Buddhist mobs swept through Muslim neighborhoods, destroying stores and setting homes on fire. The unrest came despite a state-imposed curfew. The government has ordered a state of emergency and shut down social media platforms. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg, just after 5:30 p.m. here in Washington, but it is already Friday morning, 6:30 in Hong Kong, where we are joined by Bloomberg's David Ingles with a look at the markets. David, good Friday morning to you.
And a very good morning to you as well from Hong Kong, Elisa. So, yep, as you were mentioning, of course, we'll be watching for what that announcement will be from the South Koreans. So roughly 7 p.m. Eastern time there translates to right at about the open of the cash markets in South Korea, which comes online in about 90 minutes time. When you look at the early indicators across the Asia Pacific, stocks likely to catch an early bid, as with the U.S. dollar. I'm looking at dollar yen at the moment, roughly at about 106.25 there. The euro is also obviously closely watched following the change in the language from the ECB, but also a commitment, if you will, to keep easing or to keep stimulus in play until, of course, we reach the ideal sort of levels there for inflation. Very quickly, of course, the BOJ is also very much in focus today. They do have a lot of explaining to do given the confusion in the market on where they plan to take their version of stimulus. A lot to watch out for, of course, in the Asia Pacific session. I'm David Ingles in Hong Kong. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Now back to our coverage for International Women's Day. Diane Greene has been CEO of Google Cloud since 2015, and it is a big job. Last year, Alphabet technical advisor Eric Schmidt said Alphabet has invested some $30 billion on its cloud services. Before Google, Greene was founder and CEO of VMware for a decade. We sat down with Greene and got started by asking how she made the jump from VMware to her current role leading Google Cloud.
I was sort of in the background helping, and as I got more and more involved and got to know first what was available at Google in terms of the phenomenal infrastructure and technology and engineers, and secondly, and sort of realizing what a big deal the cloud is. I mean, I knew it was a big deal, but it's just sort of profound when you think about this is a place where everybody in the world can share. And that the whole world is going digital and being connected to all these mobile devices and sensors, and you can, kind of make this available to anybody to use, almost democratize technology through it. Anyhow, it was really exciting to me the more into it I got, so Google had been talking to me about doing it, and I had been helping them find someone, and then eventually I just said, okay, I would do it.
The cloud is hotly contested territory. Amazon is in the lead, and then Microsoft. Mm-hmm. Which one of them are you more afraid of?
Well, I can't say I'm afraid of either of them. I do pay attention to them. But, last year the cloud did about $45 billion in business, and you could argue it's about $1 trillion business, so there's quite a bit of headroom for everybody there. And Microsoft and Amazon have different strengths, so does Google. What I feel like is we clearly are highly differentiated in our machine learning and data analytics. We're very differentiated in our security. If you want to keep your information secure, from G Suite, our productivity suite on down to the basic network, I think we know, we're the people that discovered Heartbleed, Spectre, Meltdown. So we have these differentiations that are where all companies are going. So that's why I can't say I'm afraid. I do see we have a lot of work cut out for us, and we're working extremely hard.
You said last year you think Google has a pretty good shot of being #1 in 5 years. Do you believe that still?
I I think it's possible. Those words were quoted a little bit out of context, but we certainly are executing extraordinarily well. We in the end of January in Google's earnings call said that we passed $1 billion a quarter in 2017, and that Google Cloud Platform is the fastest growing of the public clouds according to publicly available numbers, which puts us in the triple-digit growth. So just tremendous momentum. You know, G Suite over 4 million paying customers. So it's definitely a possibility. I don't. It's more about, you know, we're benchmarking our own growth against ourselves, and we're pretty happy with it.
Speaking of the metrics, we always want more. And when will Google actually give more details on how the cloud business is doing?
Well, we will in good time. It's so interesting to me that in January we finally gave some metrics, and now it's most frequently asked question, when are you going to give real metrics? Well, they were pretty real, but they weren't the kind of public company reporting metrics you're looking for, I'm sure.
Do you think blockchain will change cloud computing? And if so, how?
Well, blockchain gives you this distributed mechanism to verify things, which is powerful for everything. The cloud, you know, it's powerful for security, it's going to be powerful for health, and because the cloud is, you know, where every company is going to operate and all the data is going to be, it's going to be, you know, it's inevitable that blockchain is going to play a gigantic role in cloud and you know, in our fully distributed world, of which cloud plays a very meaningful role because it's where all the data gets shared.
We haven't seen Google make big M&A deals. Will we see that? Will that change?
Well, you have to be really careful about a big M&A deal. You know, we do lots of small tuck-ins. They're pretty straightforward, and we make, you know, we know we can make them very successful. When you start looking at a really big deal, and those in the middle don't necessarily make sense, and the really big deals, you know, take a lot of thought, a lot of careful, and the companies that would be ripe for a big deal don't just sort of grow on trees, and so it's possible, but it's something that would be extremely thoughtful and not super often.
So why do you think there aren't more female founders, female investors, you know, women across the tech industry? Why hasn't the industry diversified faster or gone back to its roots when women did play vital roles in the computing industry? Well,
I'm very hopeful because I do see the numbers suddenly really changing quite meaningfully and more women are getting involved. But I do think that it was a pretty difficult landscape for women. I remember when we were funding VMware, fortunately we never needed VCs, but I can remember there was famously another VC that kind of called my board members and said, you know, why don't you let me invest and I'll get a real CEO. And fortunately I had a wonderful, you know, Larry Sunsini was a wonderful board member, and, you know, it didn't make sense to him.
Well, you showed them because VMware is a massive public company today.
Yeah, I took it public. It was $19.1 billion when I took it public.
That was Google Cloud CEO Diane Greene. Well, Walt Disney investors had their chance to weigh in on the company's lucrative executive pay plan, and the result was a thumbs down. 52% of shareholders voted against the resolution on executive pay, the kind of plan that saw CEO Bob Iger reap $36 million last year and could potentially award him with even more in 2018. The resolution is non-binding with the company, so it won't actually mean a change in executive pay. Here to tell us more, Bloomberg's LA Bureau Chief Chris Palmieri. Chris, break this down for us.
Well, Disney stock has underperformed the last couple of years. Their TV business, you know, led by ESPN, has lost viewers. Also, some of the other businesses have seen profits decline. So in that context, all three of the major proxy advisory firms said, hey, you know, there isn't really a good alignment between Bob Iger's pay, which is enormous, and this company's performance. So they recommended to their shareholder clients to vote this down. And this is the first time since Disney's been asking shareholders to approve the say on pay that this has happened.
So, you know, how does this reflect on Bob Iger himself?
Well, you know, he's managed to avoid these in the past. It was controversial a while back. There was a push when he became both chairman and CEO that he shouldn't have both of those roles. You know, his performance at that time was outstanding, and he won handily. The company said today that, you know, they're going to have to take this into consideration, and they probably will. I mean, they signed a new contract with him in December. Included a $100 million bonus. Now, the company said, well, that's because we want him to stick around and see this major Fox acquisition through. But if the shareholders continue to voice their opinion as they have, I don't think Disney can ignore that.
What do Disney employees think of all this?
Well, at the meeting, there were 4 Disney employees that spoke up and said how wonderful the company was, and gave them opportunity to advance and had education. It's kind of a different story outside of the meeting, much more controlled environment inside. Their unions on both coasts that work in the parks have been advocating for higher pay. We spoke to a woman who worked at a company 5 years. She makes $11 an hour in the restaurant in Disneyland. And she says, you know, she lost her apartment and is on food stamps. So, you know, quite a lot of focus on pay at the happiest place on earth.
All right, our LA Bureau Chief, Chris Palmieri. Chris, as always, thanks so much for weighing in. Well, some new news out of Tesla. The company is reporting that accounting chief Eric Branderiz is leaving the company for personal reasons. He joined Tesla in 2016 from SunPower. Shares have dipped more than 1% in late trading. Coming up, she has been on the front lines fighting for equality and inclusion in Silicon Valley. We'll talk to Ellen Pao about how that fight is shaping up. This is Bloomberg. Uber co-founder Travis Kalanick is forming an investment fund to invest in tech startups. It will focus on real estate and e-commerce companies, as well as tech businesses in China and India. Kalanick was ousted as Uber's CEO last year and has since sold $1.4 billion in company stock. Well, when it comes to shining a light on gender inequality in Silicon Valley, Ellen Pao has long been at the forefront. She is the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Kapoor Center for Social Impact and is perhaps best known for suing the venture capital firm Kleiner Perkins for gender discrimination. She lost that suit in court, but some would argue she has won in the court of public opinion. We talked about the lack of diversity that persists in technology today and why.
It's more of this backlash against change, and it's trying to fix the problems that have taken place for the past several decades in tech, where we've created these systems that favor homogeneity. And how do we change it? Well, it requires taking down those systems and really trying to catch up, and to also just transform how you do things. And that is uncomfortable for people who succeeded in the system.
You've suggested that people need to be fired in order for real change to happen. Who should be fired?
I think people who don't believe that women and people of color and people who are older and people who are immigrants are equal employees who are able to do the same work and have these innate biases against them should be fired. If you can't treat your coworker equitably and fairly, then you really have no place in the workplace.
How do we know who those people are? I mean, is this a matter of if you haven't gotten results, or if you haven't tried, or if you've made an untoward comment? Like, how do we identify the people who, aren't doing enough?
I don't know that it's really not doing enough. I do think there are people who are, saying terrible things about their coworkers, who are sharing private information about their coworkers, so their coworkers get attacked by outsiders. Like, those people should be fired. There is no place for people who are enabling attacks on your coworkers in the workplace. You want people who believe in your culture, and if they don't believe in your culture and they show that, then they don't belong, right? They're not promoting your workplace ideals, they're not on the same page, and they're making it harder for others to do their job.
You were CEO of Reddit for a time. You made some dramatic changes that actually the research shows actually helped cut down on hate on the site. And one of the questions I ask in my book is, how might the internet be different if more women had been involved in creating these systems and designing these systems in the first place? Do you think that online harassment and trolling would be such a problem at whether it's Reddit or Facebook or Twitter? if women had been there from the start.
I think it. It's unfortunate that they were mostly started by white men and run by white men for so long, and that most of the engineering teams were white men, because nobody ever experienced it the same way that people who were of color or who were women or non-binary experienced it. I mean, it's if you don't experience it, it's hard for you to address it. And there wasn't anybody calling attention to these problems. And you see it on other platforms too, like Nextdoor and Airbnb, who now are trying to fix problems that came from a homogeneous workforce, and now they're trying to bring in changes to make sure that their platforms are more open and more inclusive and don't reflect the biases that their early employees didn't experience.
Let's talk about Facebook. What do you think can be done to fix these issues at Facebook? It's a big question, but I know you have some thoughts.
I really think that if they brought people into their leadership team, onto their board, who were actually, part of the executive team, who were, underrepresented people of color, that it would be transformative. If they had more diversity at their executive level, it would make a huge difference in how people understand issues, because it's coming up at every major decision point versus after the fact, bubbling up, through the organization and being, quashed at various points. I don't know exactly how Facebook works, obviously, but, from what I've seen in having this team at Reddit, where people were experiencing the harassment, who were, people were deep in the product and were able to share their experiences, and that really helped us make change. Like, they understood, hey, we should start small, we should focus on like one issue at a time, and these are the issues, and this is the order that we're going to go in, and do things very methodically. I don't know that there's somebody who understands these issues of harassment and the toxicity on their platform the same way as somebody, especially like a woman of color, would understand.
That was Ellen Pao, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the Kapoor Center for Social Impact. Coming up, in the battle to be your grocery store, it's brick and mortar versus Amazon. We talked to the woman leading Amazon in its quest to stock your refrigerator. Next, this is Bloomberg. In the race to be the grocery stores of the future, traditional brick and mortar retailers are doing all they can to hold off e-commerce rival Amazon. One of those retailers just suffered a major setback. Shares of Kroger, the U.S.'s largest supermarket chain, fell by as much as 12% today over investor fears about its ability to compete with Amazon, as the e-commerce giant is expanding its Amazon Prime Now delivery deal with Whole Foods to more U.S. cities. Earlier this week, we spoke with Stephanie Landry, the vice president running Amazon Prime Now and Amazon Fresh, about the company's plans to dominate the grocery market and how Amazon can keep its top people from leaving.
We have over 4,000 open jobs in just our Seattle offices today. We're constantly looking at our businesses and reevaluating and making sure that we're applying the right amount of resources in different areas. But we have so many jobs open right now. We're looking for people all over the city and actually worldwide. So I think that the opportunities here are tremendous. And I've certainly had an incredible career over the past 14 years. So I don't think that there's necessarily any sort of issue with the amount of jobs that we have.
Stephanie, you now run Amazon Prime Now and Amazon Fresh. Talk to us about just how big Prime Now is and how many people are using it.
The connection of all the businesses that I run are that we deliver food, often fresh food, and we deliver it really fast to customers, in some cases as little as an hour. The Prime Now business itself is currently available in over 50 cities worldwide, 9 countries, and in the US we're in over 30 cities. So we started that business in 2018, so it's expanded incredibly fast.
You were involved in the kickoff of Amazon Fresh grocery deliveries, and now, of course, Amazon is all in. Amazon has bought Whole Foods, but the company still lags Walmart in grocery delivery, and there is a lot of competition. What is the path to greater domination in grocery?
You know, throughout my 14-year career here at Amazon, what we really focus on is creating a great customer experience, and specifically, really a great customer experience for our Prime members. And I think that our collaboration with Whole Foods gives us an opportunity to solve a really important problem. I have a 6-year-old, I'm a mom. Taking a little kid through the grocery store is a big chore, especially if it's for things that you know exactly what you want and what you need. And being able to get it delivered to your home is just such an incredible convenience. And so I think that our collaboration, between the Whole Foods company and Amazon to be able to bring people groceries at great prices is an incredible opportunity that our Prime customers are really going to love. Just today we launched grocery delivery in as little as an hour in San Francisco and Atlanta. That's joining 4 other cities that we launched a few weeks ago. So we're really excited about that opportunity for customers.
2-hour delivery is expensive. What are you doing to address the cost side?
2-hour delivery is expensive. In order to think about cost, we're really focused on efficiency, and we drive efficiency in a lot of ways. First, knowing where our customers are and what their demand patterns are helps a lot. Next, we really leverage a lot of the algorithms and logistics expertise that Amazon has developed over the last 24 years. We're really great at bringing stuff to customers, and so we think we have a lot of advantages to be able to do well in this space and drive efficiency over time. And then scale, just getting customers to actually use the product. And those are the things that we're focused on in order to drive costs down.
That was Amazon's Stephanie Landry there. And some quick breaking news before we go. Claire's Stores, the fashion accessories chain, is declaring bankruptcy. Creditors are taking over. We are going to continue to monitor this story. You can catch those headlines across your Bloomberg terminal, and we will be back tomorrow. That's all for today. This is Bloomberg. Happy International Women's Day.